Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching The Political Vigilante. One of the things we cover on this show is why does the American corporate media not cover things? So they're covering the war in Ukraine in a very slanted way. And one of the things they're not talking about, I've seen very little coverage of all of the protests around Europe that started really into the fall of last year. And we've even had some more recently. And people are like not in favor of NATO. There's a lot of people in Europe that are not, especially since now it's the winter, and many countries in Western Europe have had to, because they were getting their natural gas from Russia. They can't now. This is part of America's plan, is to make people in Western Europe buy American natural gas, not Russia. This is what this proxy war is all about. America's profits aren't as good because Russia is there. Russia and China got off the petrodollar and started trading oil. You know, that's one of Russia's chief exports is oil, right? So and people in Western Europe are starting to they're like through this. Like, NATO is not helping us. And they're protesting it. And it's the fact when something is big, a big event is happening, and they don't talk about it in the American news. It's such a propaganda machine. I have such a problem. No, I don't say fake news. I never say that everything they say is a lie. And it's not that everything is a lie. It's that they'll deliberately only talk about one thing and deliberately not talk about something else. They do that all the time. And this is an example. So look at this. This was the Swedish people protesting against NATO forces. This was like 8-9 days ago. Posted this on their YouTube. I just typed in anti-NATO protests in Europe. I just typed that into YouTube, and this is what. This does not look to me like a small protest. So that's a big one. I wanted to show you that one, but then I wanted to show you this came out a couple months ago. These are the protests that were happening in that were happening ago.
Anti-NATO protests have gripped France as the country grapples with the cost of living crisis. The protests come amid a strike by union workers at France's petroleum refineries. A massive crowd of protesters marched through the center of Paris on Saturday, demanding that France radically change its stance on NATO and the EU, international media reported. The protesters have also called for the designation of the country's president, Emmanuel Macron. The demonstration reflects similar rallies being held across Europe in opposition to their respective governments' support for the war in Ukraine. The constant supply of arms by mainly NATO members has prolonged the conflict in Eastern Europe, leading to the suffering of civilians caught up in the crossfire. Organized by the right-wing Les Patriotes, the Patriots Party, led by Florine Philippot, the former deputy head of Marine Le Pen's national rally. Dubbed the National Meeting of Resistance, the march attracted thousands of people, according to Philippot, who was also a member of the European Parliament between 2014 and 19. The demonstrators were holding a large banner reading "Resistance" and smaller placards that read "Frexit," a reference to a demand that France leaves the EU. Many protesters were also waving the national flag. According to videos published by Philippot on social media, the crowd was chanting, "Let's go out of NATO." They also demanded the ouster of the French President Emmanuel Macron as they marched near the Parliament building, the footage purports to show. The protesters denounced NATO warmongering as well as economic disruption and energy and health restrictions linked to the sanctions the EU imposed on Russia over the conflict in Ukraine. French officials have not commented on the rally and official figures as to the number of demonstrators. The French media mostly ignored the event as well. According to the website of Les Patriots, similar rallies held on September 20. Last month, an estimated 70,000 people protested in Prague against the Czech government, calling on the ruling coalition to do more to control the soaring energy prices and voicing opposition to the European Union and NATO. For many years, the Kremlin has made it clear that if NATO continued to mass troops and weapons on the Russian border, the expansion would likely be met with serious resistance by the Russians, even with military action. On the other hand, Europe's decision to cave into American pressure and impose unprecedented sanctions on Moscow has heavily restricted the gas supplies to the continent, which have instead pushed the energy prices up, leaving many in poverty. Europe relied on 40% of Russian gas before the conflict erupted.
Did you hear that? Europe relied on 40% of Russian oil before the conflict. Now they're having to get their oil from America, and it costs more. And there isn't enough of it. I just got my gas bill. It's been freezing here in Southern California. Well, cold for Southern California. It's been like in the 40s at night. We have a lot of cold, rainy weather, you know. And so I've had to turn the heat on. It's gas-powered heat. And normally, when it's cold like this, the bill would be about $80, $90. But they sent out an email a couple weeks ago saying all the gas prices and all the war in Ukraine and all this other bullshit. And the bill was almost $200. So this is all wars are bullshit. All wars are about money. And the people of Europe are waking up to this, but Americans aren't, because we're not shown this on our media. And again, some people are like, oh, that's the France's right-wing party. Well, let me talk about Europe's right-wing parties. They're to the left of the Democrats. Our so-called liberal lefty party in America is to the right of the right-wing parties in Europe.
Subscribe to One India channel and never.
That was from media in India. So why can't we see that? Why isn't that like all over CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and ABC? Why isn't it all over those channels? Because they don't want Americans to know. They keep feeding of that Russia's on the brink of collapse. They don't have anything. The whole world is against them. And that's just not a lot of regular Europe are like, they share the same views of like, well, we don't like Putin invading, but these sanctions and keep sending NATO countries and America keeps sending weaponry to Ukraine, which is prolonging the conflict. If we keep popping up, I don't think Russia wants to keep this war going. There's Russians that don't want this war. There's young Russian men that don't want to get drafted that are leaving Russia. I talked to my friend who lives there and he's like, you know, he's talked to some buddies who were like, hey man, I've met talking. Where are you at? They're like, oh, I'm in Armenia. Oh, I'm in Kazakhstan, because they split. So, and yeah, Russia's feeding its own citizens propaganda. But if America is supposedly a free country with a free press, we should be covering this. We should be hearing all sides of this conflict, correct? Right? We should see people protesting against it in Europe. Why can't we hear the interview that Putin gave last year, where he goes, if I tried to open up a Russian base on the US border in Canada, America would go nuts. So why is it so wrong for me to not want an American NATO base in Ukraine? That's a fair argument. You can make all your criticisms about Putin all you want. He's done some awful things, but why can't we're supposed to be a free society. Hear him say that we should and be able to make our own decisions, right? No, the corporate media. And look, this is why Boeing buys ad time and Raytheon buy ad time and Northrop Grumman buy ad time on these networks. Not because they're advertising to average Americans, not so some married couple sitting on the couch going, oh, hey, honey, look, the new F-18s are in. They're doing it to buy favorable coverage. CNN isn't going to do a story. MSNBC, Fox News, they're not going to do a story on how the military-industrial complex is propping up this proxy war in Ukraine for profit because they buy ad time on those networks. You see how this works? Follow the money, connect the dots, get the truth. So if they're protesting in Europe about ending this war in Ukraine, why can't we? And all these people waving the Ukrainian flags, they want to stand with the people of Ukraine. What's happening to the people of Ukraine? That's another reason to be against this war. It's hurting civilians in Ukraine. It's hurting. That's wars killed the innocent people. Buildings get bombed up. Children, innocent people. Zelensky, when the invasion started last year, said all Ukrainian men under the age of 60 have to stay and fight. Anybody watching this show that's under the age of 60, you're in your 40s or your 50s or whatever, and you just got to, and you have no military training. What if that happened here? Because let me tell you who's not fighting in Ukraine. The children of the CEOs of Boeing and Northrop Grumman. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, their kids aren't fighting there. Hunter Biden, Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Chelsea Clinton, the Obama girls, Bush's daughters. I mean, Bush's daughters are probably drunk, but all of their children, none of their children are fighting in any of these wars. You know that, right? Working class people fight in wars. Other people suffer from war. Just an average person in France that just got a regular job you can't forget what it is. And somewhere in the neighborhood about 67, 60, 66 or 67 degrees. You can't have your heat in the dead of winter above 67 degrees. But America sent $120 billion to Ukraine. I'm sorry, man. All wars are bullshit. All wars are bullshit. And the people in Europe are waking up to this. Why can't Americans wake up to this? Call your representatives. Say, we're done with this. You want to help the people of Ukraine? End this war. Have America stop sending weaponry to Ukraine. Stop funding Ukraine. Just say, look, you guys negotiate. We'll help go to Turkey and negotiate a deal or whatever. That's if you want to help the people of Ukraine. Follow the money, connect the dots. Get the truth. And shave your knuckles for justice. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. We are still in our 9th month of demonetization from YouTube. So support what we're doing at patreon.com/Graham Elwood or rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, which is a blockchain cryptocurrency platform. It's free to sign up, and there's a premium level at $10 a month. And for that, you get everybody on the platform's premium content. Myself, Lee Camp, Ron Placone, Jimmy Dore, Whitney Webb, Kim Iverson, Abby Martin, and many, many others. You can also support what we're doing at Venmo at Graham-Elwood and go to GrahamElwood.com. We have a PayPal button and a PO box. I also have crypto wallets, which are all in the show notes. Thanks for supporting what we do.